Hello, Brother Monroe here. Welcome back to Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts and Division 3 of the Battleship League. And with me today, I have Drachinifel himself. So today we're going to be going through the predictions.
From Ascendant.
We're going to be going through the predictions of, well, from a historical point of view. So would you like to say hello, and then we can talk about our first ship?
Yes, so hi everyone. It is prediction time for another division. So I think this one's going to be very interesting. I do have some ideas for some fairly firm predictions for the top and bottom of the league.
Mm-hmm.
But it's actually quite difficult to call the middle.
Yeah.
I think.
I really have no idea. I can talk about the ships kind of from a game standpoint. We're going to go through them kind of in reverse order of how much they cost.
Yes.
So first of all, here we have Strasbourg, who is the cheapest ship at 122 million, and winner of Division 4, of course, which is why she's appearing in this division. What do we think about her chances? The 13-inch guns, of course. I think
now. Yeah. Now the thing is, although she is kind of moving up from the previous division, I don't think she's going to top this one, but I actually think she's probably going to do relatively well.
Okay.
Now I say that for two reasons. One is that maybe her main belt armor isn't the greatest, but there's a couple of other entries in this division that are just as bad or worse, or possibly call them comparable, depending on how generous you want to be. So the fact that she's not necessarily the best protected ship isn't a mark against her in terms of being at the bottom. I think it means she's still competitive. The guns, yes, they're the smallest by caliber. And that she's along with Kiwi and Nagato, they've all got 8 guns. But she does have an advantage that none of the others do, bar Nelson, which is she has the all-forward armament. So she does have options of either closing or maintaining quite a severe angle to the enemy to increase her apparent strength of protection, whilst maintaining a full broadside, whereas everybody bar Nelson who wants to do that is going to be suffering from a severe firepower loss. And even Nelson, to be fair, if Nelson wants to unleash a full salvo at an opponent, does have to be at a certain minimum angle, whereas Strasbourg theoretically can just charge head on if it wants to and unleash a full broadside.
And there's certainly something I can do when I'm commanding her.
Yes.
My only worry is how the AI handles her.
Handles the ship, yeah. The AI is always a little bit of a fun one to try and predict, but I have Strasbourg as, I think she's probably going to place somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
If she catches a full broadside from one of the ships with the bigger guns, she is going to be in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
But at least for the element where you're in control as opposed to the AI is in control, I think she should do relatively well.
I think she should be able to make a decent account of herself at the very least.
Yeah. So in a kind of in our list of 6, I'd expect her to be placing maybe 3rd or 4th.
Okay.
Significant upset, she might make 2nd, but I can't see her getting 1st.
Okay. Well, that sounds pretty fair to me. She is, I should say, of course, she is the fastest ship in this division by a fair margin as well. Not enormously useful because, of course, in real life she would run away from a lot of these fights. But I think it is worth pointing out. She does have a speed advantage. So if the AI decides to run away, it's going to be very hard for me playing any of the other ships to catch up to us. So,
and it does offer certain tactical advantages in terms of forcing the best angle of engagement for her.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm excited to see how she. I'm excited to play with her as well,
Mm.
because I love the all-forward attacking
Yes.
design, and certainly she had some rather interesting battles in Division 4. So
Mm.
yeah, she is going to be. I think she's going to be an interesting one. Right.
Yeah.
Next up is a Japanese ship, which I think I have loaded up here. No, that's the wrong one.
Yes.
It is this one, the Issei, or well, sort of the Issei,
The Pagoda of Power.
the Pagoda of Power. Indeed. So how do we think she will do? So she's costed at 130 million, near enough,
Yeah.
by the game.
Now, a minor note, purely from a game perspective, I suspect she might be slightly harder to deal with than she should be, purely because in order to get her looking even something vaguely close to what the historical ship looked like, we've had to put her on an absolutely gargantuan hull, relatively
Yes.
speaking. So she's probably got a little bit more damage absorption capability than necessarily she should. But I've actually got Issei dash whatever monstrous Frankenstein we've come up with. I've actually got her pegged for being probably in the bottom two.
Okay.
She's one of the slowest.
Yep.
So again, especially when the ship is being commanded against, pretty much anything else is going to have a speed advantage and therefore a location advantage to maneuver against her. She also is, of all the ships, forced to come to the most broadside, which renders her the most vulnerable if she wants to use her full main battery.
Definitely.
Yeah.
This turret in particular, she's really going to struggle to, make. I think probably she'd have to come in, and if she was trying to close, I mean, she's going to be in an angle like that, which is, more than 45, I think.
So she's going to be quite vulnerable, and her armor isn't that brilliant either. And
classic British understatement.
yes, and unlike practically every other ship, well, in fact, unlike every other ship in this particular entry, she has, of course, the turret farm approach, which means that you've got 3 clusters of magazines to potentially detonate. As opposed to everybody else who either has 1 cluster in the case of Strasbourg and Nelson, and in the case of the other 3, they've got 2 clusters. But this one's got 1 in midships as well.
Yeah, and those turrets are not well protected at all.
New.
And we saw with Congo in Division 4 that is not a good plan.
No.
So she might be losing the turrets rather spectacularly.
Yeah, I mean she has got the most guns of anybody in this particular league. Well, just kind of tied with Tennessee. But yeah, I don't hold out much hope for this ship, unfortunately.
Oh dear, poor old Issei. It kind of knocking her. You never know. Maybe just through sheer firepower alone.
Yeah, that's her one advantage. If she actually ends up in a full-on broadside engagement, she does have a lot of shells to throw out. And assuming that they don't explode, if she does lose a set of guns because a turret gets hit and knocked out, she has the most damage absorption capability. Obviously, Strasbourg, if she loses a turret, she's lost half her firepower. Nelson will have lost 1/3, and Tennessee, Nagato, and Kiwi will have lost a quarter, whereas Issei will have only lost a 1/6.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, she's an interesting one. But yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not. I certainly, if I was playing if I was just purely looking at it in a game point of view, this would really concern me. And the 11.8-inch main belt, because her armor quality is only 90%, according to the game.
Yes, because Japanese.
Yeah, that that does leave her a little bit vulnerable. But
yeah, it's materially fractionally thicker than Strasbourg, but once you account for the armor quality and the fact she's going to have to go a lot more broadside, yeah. I mean, there's a reason the Japanese left the Iseis and the Fusos tootling around in home ports for the majority of World War II.
Oh, poor old Ise. Right,
Yeah.
next cheapest, according to the game, we're going to have to change nation quickly, is the Queen, not that one, is the Queen Elizabeth at 132.3, although it's now complaining about
Yes.
turret mount, which I'll just fix. There we go. So, how do we think the Queen Elizabeth will do? She's not an exact replica of the Queen Elizabeth, as we talked about in her video. She looks a little bit warspite-ish, but
limitations of how many hulls are in the game engine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think along with Strasbourg and one of the other ships we're going to talk about a bit later, I think she's going to be competing for the middle slots. Whether that's second, third, or fourth, maybe somewhere around third. She's got decent enough thickness of armor, so she's probably got a bit more resistance to incoming fire than some of the others we've looked at already. Whether or not that'll be helpful against some of the bigger guns like Nagato and Nelson is another matter, but the fact that she's probably got decent protection against, say, 3 out of the other 5 competitors, it will help. She's got the 15-inch guns, so that's kind of midway in terms of caliber.
Yeah,
she has only got 8, admittedly.
And in this game, those 15-inch guns are Mark IVs, so they are considered slightly better technology than the 16s, who are Mark III.
Yeah.
And of course, Strasbourg, we forgot to mention when we were on her, those 13-inch guns are technically Mark V according to the game. So,
yes,
these 15-inch guns do have a little bit of a stat boost.
Yeah.
That's not quite represented just by the caliber.
She's kind of middle of the pack with speed. And so I can see her doing relatively well. She should be relatively handy as well. So, I think she's going to do quite well, but she doesn't have quite the firepower or protection of one or two other candidates in this division. So she could potentially come out on top, but I'm thinking somewhere between second and fourth, as I say, competing with Strasbourg.
Yeah, it makes sense, and it's a. I know I'm biased, but it's a really nice looking ship as well. But yeah, you're quite right. She should handle quite well. You've got a bit of a 4-weight offset, but that's more due to the limits of the game. She should handle quite well from our kind of initial testing that we did after we built her. I look forward to seeing how she does. Game putting it at 132 million. The next ship, in terms of price, is very, very similar, and that is Nagato, according to the game.
Yes.
At 133.7 million. So how do we think she is going to do?
Now, she's the third ship that I think is competing for second through 4. So I think Nagato, QE, and Strasbourg can be mixing it up for those. I can't really call it. Now, Nagato, I think, if I remember correctly, is pretty much the fastest bar Strasbourg. So that will give her a certain degree of maneuver advantage. Again, and she's got the firepower.
It certainly does.
Yeah, but she doesn't really have the armor to match it when it comes to her belt.
No.
So she's got a nice balance of speed and firepower. The only reason I'd said that I don't think she's going to place top is, while she can certainly dish the punishment out, and she can, apart from Strasbourg, close everybody else down to let her optimal fighting distance, she doesn't have the protection to take a full-on broadside from almost anybody, really. Like you say, she has a slightly oversized hull compared to historical, so she might have a little bit of absorption power, but yeah, almost all of her competitors can probably put some rounds into some very uncomfortable places if it devolves into a broadside versus broadside duel.
Yeah, a soft middle section, definitely.
Yes.
I mean,
it may not be necessarily Renown and the British space program with B turret, but you never know. I mean, Mutsu did explode randomly, so.
Oh dear. The turrets are well protected.
Yes.
Which is nice. So she shouldn't lose turrets too much. But of course, the problem is certainly the way Ultimate Admiral hands it. If a shell comes in here and detonates in the magazine, then the turret is going to go flying no matter how much armor it's got.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think you're right. That kind of long, not overly well protected midsection might well prove a downfall. Certainly an interesting ship though. With those guns should be very, very punchy.
Yes. I think it's going to be a case of basically if she can get the first hits in, she should begin to dominate a fight. But it's going to be a case of while she's doing that, any single lucky salvo might turn the tables, and if she's the one who gets hit first in any significant way, shape, or form, she's going to be in trouble.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I think, I'm going to have to think quite hard about how I approach using her as well, because from a game point of view, this is not how I would build a ship with that layout, and then a weaker. That.
Well, I mean, the entire Japanese World War I and 1920s design process, at least in my eyes, is kind of very suspicious. they like their speed, they like their firepower, and they seem to kind of slightly forget about their armor, which. As I say, it's fine as long as you're the one doing the hitting. But as soon as you start taking the hits, we saw Buso and Yamashiro didn't exactly last long at Surigao Strait. Kirishima didn't exactly last long against Washington, and well, Hiei lost to a bunch of cruisers. So, the most of the Japanese surface versus surface engagement losses are kind of a case in point as to why exactly you do want a bit more belt armor.
Well, quite. Right, the next ship, according to the game, anyway, in terms of price, is the American Tennessee.
Yes.
Now, we should say we originally planned to do Colorado, and when we were building her, the 16-inch guns weren't available, but that has now been fixed.
Yes.
Mention that again. I'm sure I've mentioned it before. To people watching, but the 16s are available. We could have built Colorado, but we could have gone back and redone it. But I think the 14-inch standard. I think it's nice that it's being represented, because we're going to have plenty of American 16-inch ships anyway. So
coming in, in the next couple of divisions.
So how do we think the Tennessee will do?
Now, she's a little bit of a wild card. On paper, I had her definitely marked as beating the Issei. I mean, she's a contemporary, but she's overall better design. Yeah, she's a little bit slower, but she's got the same number of guns in a better configuration. She's got better protection. About the only thing she doesn't have, which is kind of a weakness of all the standards when it comes to at least World War II, is speed.
Yeah.
But as long as people come to fight her, she should do relatively well. And if people run away from her, well, that's their problem, isn't it?
yeah, it's true enough.
It's like, come back here, I want to hit you. It's like, no.
Yeah.
So yeah, and she's got, obviously she can put out a lot of shells. Admittedly, they're not necessarily as powerful as the 16 inches on Nagato and the last one, which we'll see, which is Nelson. But My concern for her is that speed.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that it is, especially when you're sailing ships against her, you can basically everything else in this list can maneuver to maximum advantage, which which could be a bit of an Achilles heel for her. So she's a difficult one to place. Notionally, I'm putting her definitely above Issei, so she's definitely getting fifth. When I compare her with Nagata, Kirin, and Strasbourg, which are the ones I've sort of put in for competing for second through fourth, I can see her winning against any one of them in certain circumstances, but it is certain circumstances.
Yeah.
So Strasbourg, Tennessee should win the armored fight, and she does have more guns and they're slightly larger. But Strasbourg can come in, as we said when we talk about Strasbourg, she can come in head on, and Strasbourg's own guns aren't exactly pushovers.
No, they're certainly not.
Yeah, QE and Tennessee are roughly contemporaneous anyway, and at that point you've kind of got similar armor, but QE is slightly faster. And Tennessee has more guns but slightly fewer of them. Conversely, QE's guns hit slightly harder, which in a battle between two ships that actually have decent armor, I have a suspicion that perhaps QE's slightly more powerful guns might be a tipping point.
Yeah.
So QE would have the advantage. And then Nagato, she's faster, she's more heavily armed, although it's slightly fewer guns. The only real weakness she has is that Tennessee can hurt Nagato relatively easily. The flip side being that obviously Nagato's armor, by dint of being a 16-inch, could in theory somewhat obviate Tennessee's heavier belt protection, which again gives Nagato a slight advantage. So it's going to be an interesting one. My good faith argument would say, based on that, the fact that those other three all have competitive advantages, Tennessee should be coming in fifth. But I'm going to say she comes fifth, with a caveat that I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if she places better. It just depends on how each of the fights goes.
Because she has good armor compared to the other ships, particularly those turrets in close. So I think if it gets into a close range brawl, she might actually have the advantage, even though she's slow. Because I mean, if another ship is silly enough to get close to her or let her get close to them, then she might be able to get a round that hits an engine room or floods the boilers.
Then, this is the thing about Ultimate Admiral. It's like these other ships, as we just quantified, have advantages that in theory they should be able to exploit. The flip side being that they may not necessarily exploit them.
Yeah. True.
At which point the Tennessee then gets into her element.
Indeed. And she's definitely going to be an interesting one. Definitely going to be an interesting one. The slow, kind of tough competitor in the division. Ultimate Admiral certainly seems to rate her at 148 million, but I think that's mostly on her turbo electric engine.
Turbo electric, yes, a little bit expensive.
But and not really an advantage. Well, it might be an advantage in this because the way the game models it is they're much more resistant to damage, and they kind of help you pump things out. Sorry, I'm going to stop the recording very quickly. Sorry about that. We're back, and to talk about the last ship in the division, the most expensive according to the game, 170.4 million, HMS Nelson.
Yeah. Now, she's the ship which I'm expecting to probably top the league. And that's not just me as a Brit speaking. She, on paper, she does have almost all the advantages. She's got all forward armament, admittedly not quite as well laid out as Strasbourg's, but she can bring a full broadside to bear at some very narrow angles. She's got the thickest armor of any of the competitors, so she should be able to tank a fair bit of incoming fire. She's got 16-inch guns. Historically, there were some issues with them, but at the same time, ask Bismarck just how many issues her guns had. They seem to do perfectly well on the day. So I suspect, she hits hard. She's got a fair bit of interesting gameplay to play with. She does, of course, also have torpedo launchers, which may or may not be kind of a clutch move. And she's got the durability to take hits and keep on coming. The only thing that she really has against her is that she's the second slowest. Only the 10 is slower. So, people, they can run away. But, again, if they run away, that's technically a win for her.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps the speed difference is enough that something like Strasbourg might be able to maneuver in at some uncomfortable angles for her.
Yeah, I suppose...
if someone gets on her tail...
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. If the AI does its normal, I'm going to move away, which it does a lot, which it shouldn't do with Nelson, but it might, and the AI doesn't remember that, or it doesn't have any backwards firing guns. If a ship was to kind of get into kind of this position here and put shells in, then that could be a little bit uncomfortable. But hopefully the AI won't do anything moronic like that. But yeah, I think she has a very good angle. I think the angle is something like this. If I'm showing it with the game, like that. Yeah, about so she can approach a target at a very not quite dead on, but pretty close, and still fire all 9 guns, which is a pretty nice little trick. And this is the things like long range broadside engagement. She's got a nice concentrated forward battery, and the guns are fairly well protected, so she should be able to quite happily, duke it out at range. And if people get in close, well, she can close in and just say, "Yep, that's absolutely fine. I'm quite happy for a melee engagement, right up until possibly someone gets on her tail." So, yeah, she should place top. I'd be very, very surprised if she didn't come first or second. But the UA, Dreadnoughts, AI, and random events. You never know what might happen. But I mean, I know. You're quite right. You never know what's going to happen. It could just be that she gets unlucky. She does have a 2.3% flash fire chance, and any time you're kind of rolling the dice, there's a chance that happens, and that'll be the end of it for her. Which is kind of why we do, or why I'm doing the 3 rounds. So if she does, have bad luck in 1 round, she shouldn't in the other 2.
No.
So that's kind of how we average it out. And of course, these things did happen in wartime, where ships would go up against each other and something very unusual or unexpected or unpredictable happened. It does happen. So it'd be interesting to see how it all plays out, but that would be so overall. For those of you who might not have kept track of all of this, my predictions are that Nelson should be at the top, and then Nagato and QE and Strasbourg are going to be fighting for the next 3 places. And honestly, there's so many advantages and disadvantages to those 3. I can't really call what order they're going to be in. But for the sake of, let's see how on the money Drac is or isn't, I'm going to go Nagato, QE, Strasbourg. Okay.
Just for the sake of fun. But I'm not going to be at all surprised if that order turns out to be wrong. And then I'm going to put Tennessee and then Issei at the bottom. Again, with the caveat that Tennessee theoretically has the capability to go toe-to-toe with any of the 3 that are competing for second through fourth. But she is at a slight disadvantage there. But again, rolls of the dice and the will of UA Dreadnoughts AI may allow her to place higher.
Sure.
So it's actually a very difficult one to predict compared to some of the other divisions we've had to look at. But I'd be interested to see how it all works out.
Yeah, and me too, of course. And just for those watching, wondering, well, hang on, you've got 2 British ships and 2 Japanese ships. The way I'm going to be scoring it is the same as Division 4. So 3 points if the ship wins when it's both controlled by me and by the AI. 2 points if it needs to go for a AI versus AI tiebreaker. 1 point if it's a draw, and no points for a loss. But rather than just adding up the points, I will be doing an average. So adding up all the points they get and dividing by the number of battles fought. So they'll get a score between 0 and 3, basically. And the closer they are to 3, then the closer they will be to being the winner, essentially. And the other 2 divisions will probably have to have that approach as well, because we're going to have some duplicate countries, which is fine. But yeah, I'm really, really interested to see how it all plays out. And yeah.
Which one will be rebuilding for the next division?
Who are going to be rebuilding for the next division, indeed. Well, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and how you think this is all going to play out. And those of you watching, you can look forward to seeing all of those battles in the coming days. Well, thank you, and see you again soon for some more Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts. Bye for now.
Yeah, see you then. Bye.